This is Stephen Platinum, your friend in wrestling, with Platinum versus AEW Dynamite. This is from March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 2021. What can you say? In a show where I am going to break down the individual components of the show, because there's a lot of teachable moments, a lot of things that did not go well, or signs of places where AEW is weak. At the end of the day, what people are talking about and what they will continue to talk about and what they will remember when they think of this show, and rightfully so, is Thunder Rosa against Britt Baker, which is the culmination and a very satisfactory one of a feud that's been booked incredibly well, has gone for a long amount of time, that had emotional and personal issues and paid off handsomely, even using the thumbtacks in a way that made sense in a wrestling context, in addition to the spectacle of it. It was a great place where spectacle met storytelling. And the two of them held hand in hand and just kicked all kinds of ass. Kudos to everybody who was involved. And I just have to put that thing over as much as possible here at the beginning, because as I begin to break things down segment by segment, and this was a really good show, once in a while, I tend to breeze over this stuff, and I tend to just have like a lesson or two, because I think that ultimately is what sticks in people's minds. And this thing is for aspiring bookers and wrestling people as much as for anybody. So I'd rather have one or two lessons really stick rather than nitpick stuff to a large extent. But this show, I think, is a good time to sort of stop and sort of pick things apart. And so I'm just going to acknowledge from the jump that main event was absolutely sensational. And I don't think that requires a lot of explanation of why. If you need me to go into that in depth, I'm happy to, I guess, but it just doesn't seem necessary. So we open with what we will come to know as the Pinnacle getting off of a plane looking boss. Great the way to start. They closed the show. It was very smart that they did not have the Inner Circle represented in any way, shape, or form on this show. I think that was very smart to show the power of the Pinnacle. First match, Penta against Cody. Definitely a good look for Penta. Working on that arm, doing his thing. Cody, though, taking that arm snap move that Penta has been using as a de facto finisher, honestly. And then rolling him up with that sunset flip-like maneuver without the sunset flip part. Definitely a shit finish. You try stuff, at least they're giving us a finish. I'm not begrudging that. Though if there is a time where you wanted to kind of have a non-finish, this may have been it. Cody winning in that way, even with Penta beating him down afterwards, there's something about it that just didn't feel right. I'll just put it as simple as that. The match is done. They run down the card. The Bucks start cutting a promo. Put Ray Phoenix over. You've beaten us one-on-one before, and they kind of get into this idea of where they're going with the promo, and that's when Don Callis cuts him off, which I thought was very effective. And the Don Callis promo, Don Callis has been on fire. People have said he's always been great, but no, the promo that he cut on the last Impact, he's just been incredibly effective. Don Callis has just been doing really good work. He's making me into a much bigger fan than I was before. We're going to have Jade Cargill after the break. So we go to the break, we come back. Jade Cargill against Danny Jordan. This match was exactly what it should have been. Kick, a move, and a finish. And that German suplex looked hellacious. So kudos to Danny Jordan for taking it well. But this match is exactly what it should have been, which is Jade Cargill over all day. Then we had this promo thing with the Pinnacle. MJF particularly brutal here to Chris Jericho. Really something. And Tully Blanchard earning his money. Certainly out of, I think, all the older gentlemen that they use, Tully Blanchard has really taken the forefront. Arn has sort of fallen back, and Jake is downright terrible. Jake Roberts is awful. We need to talk about that. But we go to commercial, and we come back. Jurassic Express and Bear Country against Private Party, Butcher and Blade and Matt Hardy. I mean, this match, I guess it's what it was supposed to be. And Marco Stunt tagging himself in and then getting destroyed. It works. They got a split screen for this match as well, which is a little weird, but it is what it is. But you can't help but feel, right? Like Private Party, Butcher and Blade, and Matt Hardy with the bunny. I mean, it just feels very ramshackle. And they haven't found a unifying theme yet, and I doubt they will. It's just one of those things where it just feels like it's holding serve. Eddie Kingston and John Moxley with the promo. Moxley mocking the Good Brothers. It wasn't the barn burner of a promo, but it definitely advanced their cause, set us up for the match they're going to have later. Then we go to commercial. And the Eddie Kingston Moxley promo, there's something else that it did that I liked, which is the Good Brothers, part of their shtick is they always act like they're sort of above it all and too cool for school, almost to the detriment of the show that they're on. They advance their cause, but it feels like they diminish the show by what they say and how they act. And Eddie Kingston and Moxley sort of addressing that, I think, was very smart. It's the Mercutio factor that I've talked about before, where because Romeo and Juliet on the surface is very sappy and there's lots of kind of holes in the thinking, by having Mercutio point these things out to the audience, it sort of nullifies the negative effect of them. And I think Moxley and Kingston addressing the fact that, Gallows and Anderson just tend to like shit on everything around them. And by pointing it out, it sort of nullifies the effect of them doing it, which is great. So now we have Dasha back from commercial. Dasha with Christian. Not an incredibly effective promo by Christian, a very workmanlike one. We need some joy off of him. I think that's the secret. Is him coming in serious as a heart attack. I get it, but we want joy. I mean, I think when people think of Christian, yes, there's the serious aspect part, and I do like the work hard thing, but we want some joy. I think Christian would do himself a little favor having the joy aspect. It's one of those things that helps mitigate Sting not doing a lot, but there's a joyful vibe of him being there that they have definitely tapped into. And I think Christian has his own kind of self-generated joy that I want to see. Match number 4, Eddie Kingston and John Moxley against the Good Brothers. It's exactly the match it should be, right? Good Brothers tend to dominate. Eddie Kingston and John Moxley manage to win. Mox wins with a small package, so now we've had 2 roll-up finishes. AEW, this is a major problem. They fall in love with doing the same thing again and again and again in the context of the same show. So we have like all these roll-up finishes. And then, or if somebody has like a beat down after a match, then we're going to tend to see that a bunch of other times. And they just sort of mute the effects by repeatedly doing them. And I call AEW at times the League of Diminishing Returns, that they don't seem to get that. Though it seemed like everything was all hands on deck to not do too much to really let Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa shine. And that was duly noted. And it's why I sort of forgave the Rey Fenix match for not being all that exciting. Clearly, it was like, we want to save stuff for Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa. And I thought that was successfully done. After a small package by Moxley, they get beat down. The faces, that is, and Omega comes and helps beat them down, sits in the chair, then gets knocked off his chair by Eddie Kingston and all this kind of stuff. And then the Young Bucks show up, and then the Young Bucks will not join in with the Good Brothers and Omega on the beatdown. Okay. Commercial. Come back. Tony Schiavone's with Sting and Darby Allin. Another segment where Sting says nothing, by the way. So Darby, in case people were like, Sting is just stealing the spotlight. That is clearly not happening, almost to a fault. Darby Allin clearly has the rub. Cuts a really good promo, which is good because Darby normally, in longer promos, they tend to be terrible. But this one, it was very well directed and he was focused. And I want to pay tribute to the greatest TNT champion ever. People chanted Brody Lee and give Dark Order a shot. Cool. Lance Archer comes and interrupts, basically throwing his weight around. Cool. Jake Roberts, whatever he said here, it was awful. Jake has not had anything cool and of value to say since maybe the thing with Arn, and even then that thing wasn't nearly as good as it should have been. Taz with Team Taz also show up, and then Brian Cage does this I respect you thing. So now this is what I mean about AEW. We've had a number of face and heel turns as of late, and this one just added to it. Again, it's just so much, so many, and then we'll go without one for a long time. AEW does a lot of like pushing the button again and again and again and again and again, and they are not a slow release time capsule, and they should be, because when they do a lot that stuff, they do it really well, and Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker again show that. So yeah, I'm all for Brian Cage being a face. In fact, I was saying the other day, a friend of mine asked me and said, yeah, well, what can they really do with Brian Cage? And I'm like, I think you turn him face and you put him in a thing with Kenny Omega and you just let them go. And I think you can really see the upper potential of what Brian Cage can really do. And sure enough, it seems like we're going down that route eventually. Ray Phoenix against Angelico. Unfortunately, these guys saved a lot of the cooler stuff that they were doing for the split screen part, which is the worst time to do anything of note. That crazy looking surfboardy submission thing, we didn't really get to see how cool that was. Ray Phoenix was not flying all over the place in this one. It was a workman-like match where he was really trying to adapt to Angelico's wrestling style, which I thought was a cool little story. It came across as flat, though, if I'm being honest. But he did win with that knee to the head and then that drop into that kind of sit-down pile driver thing. So he wins. A weird little segment with Miro talking about Charles. He doesn't want to do the tag match, but Kip does. And so there's teasing a split there, and Miro's out of control. It is what it is. And then we have another little bit with the Pinnacle. And then the lights go out, and we have the match. And it was fucking great. So a couple things that I haven't seen anybody else point out about this match that were additionally brilliant. Every time they cut to Shida watching, it was to prevent us from having to see things being set up. In the same way that AEW is brilliantly took advantage of when Moxley was having that fight in the kitchen and all that stuff. And then they cut to, let's show you clips of cool stuff that happened at the beginning of this match. And then that way we didn't have to watch Jon Moxley walking back to the ring. And here, every time they used Shida, that's when they would show stuff being sort of set up mechanically or them recovering from damage, and we just didn't have to see them taking a minute to stand up. So again, it's really smart. AEW, like as I described it today to a friend of mine, they clearly love wrestling, and it's not that it's flawless. I point out mistakes all the time, but the mistakes are made in service of something. Whereas I often feel when I watch certain WWE products, mistakes are made just because they're being reactive and because they don't really seem to have a long-term plan or give a shit. Whereas AEW, if they have a fault, it's that they care too much and want to do too much. And we'll see which one wins in the end. But for tonight, and I'm sure NXT had great stuff, and I'm going to look at that show in just a bit, but nothing is going to touch Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa. Really phenomenal payoff of long-term storytelling. It elevated the women's division. It elevated them. It did everything that pro wrestling is supposed to do and supposed to be, and it was lovely to see. And the little deathmatch elements, you know I love that too. I keep telling you guys, deathmatch is finding its way into wrestling, and if this didn't help prove it, I don't know what will.